New York City has just announced the most draconian vaccine mandate we have seen yet in the United States. In New York, you will now be required to have 2 vaccines, as will children ages 5 to 11, if you want access to any public accommodation, with some exceptions. And Bill de Blasio has announced all private sector workers must be vaccinated. This goes well above and beyond what the government has the right to do. And it's unsurprising. We've been saying for some time this was going to happen. They started by saying just one dose of any vaccine and you're good to use the facilities in New York City. That is to say, if you have an ID on you and your vaccine card. Now, there's been reports that many businesses have not really been enforcing this, but it seems like it's going to continue escalating anyway, especially with news of the Omicron variant. Now, they say much like Delta and those before it, COVID seems to be getting less deadly, but more transmissible, which makes sense. This is the path of a virus. However, the media will still drum up fears. You will still get this from many politicians. And now they're going to escalate their ability to control you. In Germany, for instance, the unvaccinated can barely leave their homes. They're locked out of public accommodations. Hey, much like what New York City is doing. When Germany and Austria announced they were locking down the unvaccinated, it sounded different to what we were already seeing. No, it's basically a vaccine mandate. And now in Europe, they're discussing compulsory vaccines. I think it's only a matter of time before we see that here in the U.S. Now, what New York is doing, in my opinion, is unconstitutional. And we've got some interesting news. Joe Biden has been losing on this front. There's been several court rulings saying you can't mandate federal workers or healthcare workers. And because of this, a major hospital network in Florida has announced they are suspending their vaccine mandate for employees because the federal government doesn't have the authority to actually implement this. We're now hearing that Manchin of West Virginia may vote with Republicans, 50 Republicans, to do away with Joe Biden's vaccine mandates. Now, I will stress this as I do in most of these videos, and we'll have a progression of the conversation. I'll say this: whatever you want to do with your health is between you and your doctor, and not me or anybody on the internet or Fauci or Joe Rogan, because your medical history is unique to you. I certainly think it's fair to say that the vaccines work exactly as described. Now, I can already hear people commenting and typing away saying, Tim, you're wrong. The efficacy. No. Hold on. Bear with me. That's exactly as they've described it. We're hearing reports out of Israel that they're now saying they think people should have a 4th booster shot. It is described as such, as reducing transmissibility, reducing severity. I have personally witnessed that, and also that its efficacy is waning, and now we need booster shots. And the Daily Beast ran that article I've cited 50 million times saying it's actually a 3-dose vaccine. How long until New York says the exact same thing? So I think the vaccine is doing exactly what's being said in the media. Efficacy is waning. We're getting more breakthrough cases. People who were vaccinated earlier in the year probably need booster shots. And so ultimately what it comes down to is that's exactly what's in the news. And that should inform your decisions however you choose. I won't tell you what to do. I'm not an expert on science or medical or anything like that. I can only read the stories and read the studies. I'll tell you what I am an expert on: freedom in America. Sort of. I'm not even the best expert on any of those things, but I am someone who can speak to this. And I'll put it simply, policy-wise, this is a failure, a mistake. It's unconstitutional. And we're now watching Bill de Blasio try to implement what the federal courts have already said Joe Biden cannot do. So where are the courts to shut down what New York is doing? Vaccines for kids ages 5 to 11. 2 doses. Let's read the news. And we also have big news out of Europe. Riots have been erupting over this stuff. So, yeah, I probably shouldn't bury that. But I do think, what's hitting here at home in New York is slightly more important because, well, I'll be honest. I'm looking at the news and I'm like, riots in Europe over COVID lockdowns. It's pretty important. New York requiring 2 doses for even children and the private sector. Well, this affects us a lot more. And more importantly, this means that 40.2% of Americans will not have access to New York City public accommodation. And that means just around 30%, a little bit more than 30% of New York residents are being locked out. And they're mostly black residents. So let's make that clear. Now, before we get started, head over to timcast.com, become a member, and support our work. All of this stuff that we're doing, it is supported because of the timcast.com members, and you get access to our exclusive members only segments from all of our shows. We launched a new show on pop culture. We'll talk about movies and trailers and all that stuff. And of course, we have the Timcast IRL podcast members only segments. We have hundreds behind the scenes, uncensored, all that good stuff. So please become a member at timcast.com. Support us. But don't forget to also subscribe to this channel, hit that like button, and share this video. Let people know what's going on because, my friends, they say the night is always darkest before the dawn, but it is getting pretty dark, and I'm looking forward to that dawn coming any minute now. From NBC New York, NYC expands vaccine mandate to whole private sector, ups dose proof to 2, and adds kids 5 to 11. They say all private sector workers in New York City will be subject to the mayor's vaccine mandate starting December 27th, affecting 184,000 businesses, while vaccine proof for indoor dining, fitness, and entertainment will be required for children ages 5 to 11, according to a toughened vaccine mandate announced by Bill de Blasio Monday. The current rule will also expand to require 2 vaccine doses instead of proof of only 1, as far as people aged 12 and older are concerned, the mayor said. That excludes people who were vaccinated with Johnson & Johnson's single-dose shot. Wow, man. They said, 1 and done. Remember that? Which one are you going for? Pfizer, you got to get 2 shots, but Johnson & Johnson, 1 and done. Now they're saying, what is it, like 2 months after getting Johnson & Johnson, you got to get a booster, and Pfizer and Moderna is 6 months. In Germany, they're saying your vaccine passport expires. Some people have told me it's 6 months, but they're saying you have to renew your vaccine every 9 months. So perhaps if you after 6 months, your vaccine passport expires, you have to go in and get a new one, and okay, you're within 9 months, so you're good. It's not going to end here. They keep saying it's a carrot on a stick, and they're behind us dangling the carrot saying just a little bit more for your safety, and then everything can go back to normal, but it's not happening. And I think if you think it is going to happen, you're being naive. Now, they're going to say kids aged 5 to 11 only need to show proof of 1 dose. Oh, okay. So there's a correction. 1 dose when the requirement for them kicks in on December 14th, considering they only first become eligible for their initial doses in early November and must wait at least 21 days between Pfizer doses. De Blasio hinted late last week that changes to the city's vaccine policies would be coming soon, given the latest challenges posed to the city's ongoing COVID war. He said more measures may be imminent as far as vaccinations go, too. I want to make a few very, very important points. We've seen a lot of stories about breakthrough cases. And there's a meme. I even posted the meme where it's a clown and it's like, got my first dose, got my second dose, got my booster. And he's putting the clown makeup on and it's like tested positive for COVID. This, to me, is completely in line with everything we know about the vaccines. When we all got sick here, we had some breakthrough cases. Interestingly, one breakthrough case, which was like moderate, it wasn't severe, but it was like bad sickness, painful, was someone who got the vaccine a while ago. So like back earlier in the year, which makes sense based on what they've been saying about waning efficacy and the need for a booster shot. And then we had another person who got the sniffles basically, and they had been vaccinated only like a month or 2 ago. So I'm like, they still got sick. That is in line with what they've said. They've never said the vaccine will prevent you from getting COVID, only that it dramatically reduces it and that it reduces the severity of symptoms. Then they came out and said, you know what? Efficacy is waning. We're going to need, boosters. And here we are. Israel's talking about 4th and maybe even 5th shots. In the U.S., they've already stated in the press 3 shots. None of that to me is anything having to do with an argument, because I'll tell you this. I don't know. If that's what the media has been saying, sure. I went to a doctor and they gave me monoclonal antibodies and I got sick. And I will also stress, worst illness I've ever had. Hands down. I didn't think so at first. I was like, it's not so bad. Man, it was crazy. No joke. And I don't even know what variant this was. Because if they're saying that like Omicron is less deadly and maybe I had Delta or whatever, if Alpha was worse than that, it is bad. I got to be honest. I still feel it in my lungs. I have tested positive for the antibodies. I have tested negative, so I'm in the clear. I'm fine. I've been having a good time. I was skating a little bit the other day, but I can still feel it, or I can still feel something. So I'll tell you this, man, you definitely want to take it seriously. And I'll tell you this too, that personal experience lends to an understanding of why they're doing what they're doing in these cities, but they're wrong. I'm sorry. It's just reality. They're wrong. You want to say you want to slow the spread and all this stuff, and this is serious. I totally get it. But we have monoclonal antibody centers. Florida's doing a fantastic job. You need only look at Florida to understand why the fear and panic is not working for these blue states and cities. And it appears to me that they are exploiting this for political power. Because you look at Florida and things are going pretty well. Here's a quote. We've got Omicron as a new factor. We've got the colder weather, which is going to really create additional challenges with the Delta variant. We've got holiday gatherings, de Blasio said Monday as he announced the mandate on MSNBC. We're in New York City. We in New York City have decided to use a preemptive strike to really do something bold to stop further growth of COVID and the dangers it's causing to all of us. Now, there's some factors to consider. It is warmer in Florida. Maybe that plays a role. We've also seen this year, we've had more COVID deaths than last year. Some people have said, well, that's because we ended a lot of the lockdowns and restrictions. And with the vaccine, we've then opened up businesses and people aren't wearing masks. But that argument doesn't factor in that the vaccines should be reducing the amount of cases. So at the very least, we could say we had the same amount. No, it's only gotten worse. And that's cases, mind you. I think you take a look at the states that have been less restrictive. Many of these southern states, they seem to be doing a lot better. Now, it could be that because it's warmer out, people in Florida and other southern states are going outside more. So they're less likely to be in a room with circulated air. Don't ask me. I don't know. And because of that, I ultimately just fall on the side of it's between you and your doctor. I'm not here to give you medical or financial advice. Have you seen the crypto market lately? Don't take any of that stuff from me. I can only show you what's going on in the news and give you my thoughts and opinions as it pertains to that, but I can't tell you what to do. Now, we have this here from Mayo Clinic, U.S. COVID-19 vaccine rates over time. We can see that as of December 5th, 2021, fully vaccinated is at 59.8%. That means in New York City, 40.2% of this country will not be able to access public accommodation. And that, I believe, is wrong. If we also scroll up to this map here, we can see even in New York, it's at 69.1. That means 30.9% of New York State residents will not be able to get this vaccine. And I think that is just absolutely insane. Now, we don't have singling out New York. It's probably high for New York. But what happens if you live just in upstate New York? You can't go to the city? That's nuts. Well, here we go. Advent Health suspends COVID-19 vaccination requirements for employees because it's unconstitutional, because Joe Biden doesn't have the right to do it. This is wesh.com. Advent Health will no longer require employees to get the COVID-19 vaccine. The hospital made the announcement after a federal court ruled the federal government couldn't enforce such mandates. In a statement released by Advent Health, the hospital says it will no longer mandate the COVID-19 vaccine for employees after a federal court blocked the Biden administration from enforcing such mandates earlier this week. Quote, I think what companies are doing is they want to see how this plays out legally in the courts, said Anthony Hall, a lawyer at the Leach firm. Ever since the vaccine became available, there's been a legal fight over whether or not the government or private companies can mandate it. Well, take that precedent to New York City and tell them what they're doing is unconstitutional and in violation of the courts, et cetera, and maybe you'll have to sue them. Maybe that's what will happen. But I'll tell you the game. Joe Biden mandated these vaccines by press conference, not by decree, because he wanted people to believe they'd have to do it no matter what. Then, once everyone goes out and says fine, because their businesses are saying you have to do it, he's created a workaround. His decree is not legal. It's not constitutional. The private businesses say, well, we have to do it. Thus, the employees are obligated by the business. And then a couple months later, the courts say no. The business says, oh, well, I guess we can't. But how many people already were forced to do it? I'll put it this way. If this happened to me, if I worked for a company, I would file a lawsuit and say they threatened us with our jobs and we underwent an irreversible medical procedure based on an unconstitutional order that shouldn't have ever been in place. And the business implemented this without being near any deadlines. I would absolutely sue for damages. I know maybe it's not possible, but I'd push for it at least. Maybe that's something people can do. Now, we got some more good news. Senate set to vote on bill barring Biden vaccine mandate, likely to pass with Manchin's support, of all people. Glad Manchin's there, I guess, but he may as well be a Republican, I suppose. But not that it really matters what party you're in. It just depends on where you vote. Fox News reports the Senate is set to vote this week on a resolution to nullify President Biden's vaccine mandate for private companies as Republicans and at least one Democrat push back on the administration's rule requiring vaccines or inconvenient testing rules for workers at large businesses. All 50 Senate Republicans, led by Senator Mike Braun of Indiana, backed a challenge to the vaccine mandate last month under the Congressional Review Act. That law allows Congress to officially disapprove of an executive branch regulation via a resolution passed through each chamber. Senator Joe Manchin said last week he also supports the Braun resolution. Quote, "I do not support any government vaccine mandate on private businesses," Manchin said Thursday after voting against an amendment to a government funding bill that would roll back public and private vaccine mandates. Senator Mike Lee of Utah and a handful of other Republicans forced that vote in exchange for expediting passage of the funding bill, but they got no Democrat support. Republicans also think Kyrsten Sinema may vote for the Braun resolution. She declined to say whether she will vote for it in an interview with CNN last week. Senator Steve Daines of Montana is also pushing his Democrat counterpart from Montana, Senator Jon Tester, to join me in my efforts to block all of Biden's mandates. The Braun resolution only needs a simple majority to pass the Senate, which means the bill will likely succeed. Rep. Fred Keller of Pennsylvania is leading companion legislation in the House of Representatives, which his office said Friday has 206 co-sponsors. But House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy from California said Friday it is unlikely the bill would come for a vote in the House with Speaker Nancy Pelosi in charge. The challenge is how you bring it up on the floor. We are not in the majority. We don't control it. Even if Republicans and potentially a handful of Democrats manage to force a House vote on the CRA resolution, such resolutions are subject to a presidential veto. And it's highly unlikely Biden would sign a bill canceling a rule he ordered his administration to make. It'll come up again likely again next week with the Congressional Review Act resolution of disapproval, Lee said Thursday. That's sufficient, of course. One of the defects with the CRA is that the Congressional Review Act resolutions of disapproval are subject to presidential veto. So the same president who abuses his executive power, as the president has with these mandates, is certain to veto. So that's a big challenge. It's a big challenge in stopping these mandates, but I will tell you the courts seem to be saying no outright, and those who oppose government overreach may actually win on that front. But let me show you how far it goes with Joe Biden. Biden's COVID SAR suggests pandemic restrictions will end once, quote, the rest of the world gets vaccinated. Now, I think this is a bit of an exaggeration from RNC research. Let me just show you exactly what they say.
The president has been clear from the start to protect the American people.
All right, it's a little bit quiet. He says, to protect the American people, we must end COVID. And I'll play it real quick.
That means we must ensure the rest of the world gets vaccinated.
That means we must ensure the rest of the world gets vaccinated. He didn't come out and overtly say, we're going to be locked down until the entire world is vaccinated. He said, protecting the American people means vaccinating the rest of the world. Broad overreach there. COVID-19 response from White House. That to me is insane. It is not our responsibility to go vaccinate the rest of the world. I mean, we're going to be heading to sub-Saharan Africa with massive vaccine doses to be giving out to everybody. Look at what's going on already. We need boosters. So they say, and we're going to be giving them away. That to me is absurd. Now here's what happens in Europe over the weekend. The Hill reports tens of thousands protest COVID-19 restrictions in Central Europe. I mean, let's be real. It was all over the place. Politico reports vaccines don't make you free. Thousands protest COVID-19 measures in Brussels. We have this property damaged in heated Luxembourg COVID protests in Belgium. Police use water cannons, tear gas on COVID-19 protesters. ABC News says thousands came to reject the new measures announced Friday. The third week in a row, the government has tightened its rules as an avalanche of new cases strains the country's health services, depriving people with other life-threatening diseases of treatment, shouting freedom, freedom, and carrying banners that said, United for our freedom, rights, and our children. The protesters marched to the European Union headquarters. Some also carried signs critical of vaccines and against making vaccine shots mandatory. The main crowd in Sunday's mostly peaceful march, I love how they say that, mostly peaceful, had already dispersed when about 100 protesters ran into a riot police barricade, cordoning off access to the European Commission. After a brief standoff with police, protesters hurled trash and other objects, including a bicycle, at police and set off firecrackers and flares. Police used water cannons and fired tear gas to disperse the crowd. There were no immediate reports of injuries. Now, I'm not a fan of clashing with cops. I'm not a fan of this kind of violence, and I'm not a fan of police spraying people down like this. I'll tell you though, there's a hard limit for everybody. When we see far leftists trying to burn down buildings and they're firebombing police trucks, I don't think you're solving anything. I don't think anyone here fighting with cops was solving anything. I got to be honest. I think peaceful protests actually work because it shifts perception, and studies have shown this. This is just true. Black Lives Matter lost nearly all of their support. Actually, this is true. January of 2020, Black Lives Matter saw major growth throughout the year for their cause, culminating with the George Floyd incident. And then after they started rioting, they lost all of the gains in support they had made that year. People do not want violence. People want to be left alone. And if they see government overreach, they don't feel left alone. But when they see you going out throwing stuff and fighting and smashing things, they now feel like you are the problem. It's not perfect. You know, I have people asking me all the time, well, where's the line, Tim? I mean, if the government's trying to force you onto a train car to a camp, I'm like, yeah, maybe that's the line, okay? Look, what's going on in Australia is a really great example of where the line has been crossed. There was a Holocaust Museum definition of concentration camp. It was posted by James Lindsay. And it said the difference between concentration camps and any other detainment is the lack of due process. People taken in violation of their rights. They're not given charges. They're not given, they're not given a court appearance. They're just literally taken in violation of due process. And they said that is what separates concentration camps from, other kinds of detainment. Okay, well, I think we use the phrase concentration camp colloquially to refer to what happened in, Nazi Germany. But I certainly think it's fair to say when they come to your house, and we have witnesses testifying to this, Haley Hodgson in the Unheard interview, they said, you're coming with us. You have no choice. She's not been served a warrant. She's not faced any criminal charges. They're literally just taking her to a camp for 2 weeks. I mean, that is a jail sentence. You're not allowed to leave your porch. Take your mask off. We'll fine you $5,000. Yeah, that's internment at the very least. That's how bad it's getting. But one thing that I think, needs to be brought up is what's happening in, let me see if I can find this. Do we have this? I don't know if we do. We have this one from Post Millennial. Shocking. In the wake of Austria's drastic lockdown of unvaccinated people, European Union chief calls for throwing out Nuremberg Code. This, I do not believe, is accurate. But it's technically correct, and I'm not a fan of the phrasing here because I did investigate this, and it turns out it's not necessarily the truth. From the BBC, COVID Omicron, time to consider mandatory jabs, EU chief says. Now, in this article, nowhere does she say we're going to throw out the Nuremberg Code or anything like that. That I didn't see. This came from an individual who tweeted. Michael P. Sanger said, shortly after Austria became the first country to make COVID vaccinations compulsory, EU Chief Ursula von der Leyen calls for dispensing with the Nuremberg Code and making vaccination mandatory across Europe. Jordan Peterson then said, hey, it's just the Nuremberg Code, only what we learned from the Nazi atrocities, not least those that were medical, and that's true. But what actually happened is she said there should be mandatory vaccinations or something to that effect. And the first rule, the first point of the Nuremberg Code is that all experimentation must be voluntary. Now, some people are arguing that because the vaccines are only under emergency use authorization and long-term testing hasn't been done, they are currently still experimental. I'm just being careful in how I use language. Again, I say talk to your doctor. But the argument is, so long as they're under EUA and not FDA approved, and the current vaccines being distributed here in the United States are not FDA approved, there's some contention over community. My understanding is that recently a judge ruled that you can't mandate a vaccine on the military unless it is FDA approved, which created a weird argument where people are like, hey, wait a minute. Is he saying that the difference between Pfizer's BioNTech vaccine and their official branded community is distinct as such? You can't mandate one? Look into it. I'm not going to make those assessments. The point is, I believe it's not entirely correct to say that the EU chief or whatever is saying to get rid of the Nuremberg Code. However, it does seem like she's actually dancing on the line. If we don't have long-term testing for the vaccines, and that's literally written in the insert for the community vaccine, the one that's been FDA approved, it says long-term data trials are underway and, certain risks aren't known, then it stands to reason you could argue experimental, but I think it's important to be very distinct. She did not say to do away with this. I still think mandatory vaccination is completely wrong. Yeah, okay. So this is the BBC saying, Ursula von der Leyen said vaccines would be crucial in the fight against the highly contagious new variant. Some 24 countries have reported cases of Omicron. The World Health Organization, meanwhile, said early signs were that most cases were mild, which is good news. This makes sense. It becomes more transmissible, but less deadly. On Wednesday, von der Leyen said it was understandable and appropriate for EU members to discuss mandatory COVID vaccines, given that a third of the bloc's population was unvaccinated. How can we encourage and potentially think about mandatory vaccination within the European Union? This needs discussion. This needs a common approach. But it is a discussion that I think has to be led. Only individual EU states can enforce vaccine mandates, and some are already taking steps in that direction. Austria, Germany, this we understand. Here's a quote. It says, "No sign vaccines won't work." The WHO, which declared Omicron of concern on Friday following its rapid spread in South Africa, said it will know more about the new variant within days. Omicron is becoming the dominant COVID strain in South Africa, where the daily number of recorded cases doubled on Wednesday. Officials there say the variant could be fueling the surge. However, the World Health Organization has already said it believes existing vaccines will still prevent severe disease among people who contract the new variant. Asked about the severity of cases, World Health Organization epidemiologist Dr. Maria van Kerkhove said, there is some indication that some of the patients are presenting with mild disease. There is still suggestion of increased hospitalizations across South Africa, but this could be the sheer fact that we have more cases. And if you have more cases, you have more hospitalizations. Very important points. You got to be careful. You don't get torn in any direction. There are a lot of people who, I've spoken with, even on Timcast IRL, who say the vaccines don't work. Now, truth be told, I've said these are, I've insulted the vaccines. I've said they're crappy. And the reason is we were initially sold a bill of sale. Johnson & Johnson, one and done. Now we're being told you got to get another booster and probably you want to do mRNA stuff. We were sold a bill of sale. Pfizer and Moderna, one shot, follow it up, and then you're good. One shot, the vaccine mandates, but increasingly, they are coming out with new data. And hey, that's the science, right? Science changes. And we're being told now that you need a booster because the efficacy of the vaccine may only be 6 months or whatever. Suffice it to say, there are a lot of people who have told me, and I've said this on IRL, we got to be very careful about correlation. They're like, look at this, Belgium, has X percent of people are vaccinated, and now they're having all these cases, so they're locking down and riots are breaking out. And they take that to assume it means the vaccine doesn't work. I counter that with, it certainly means the initial thing we were sold is not accurate, but it doesn't mean they don't work. It certainly means the media is telling us the truth when the efficacy is waning, right? Or at least the initial studies and reports. I shouldn't say the media is saying, I said the studies and reports are showing this. What I mean to say is what they're telling us now is likely going to be wrong, and that's science. So when they told us one thing, and now we're at the point where we're up to 4 vaccines in places like Israel and 3 in the United States, the booster shot, what will likely happen is you will have to get another booster shot later on. So the vaccine reduces transmissibility, which they've always said, reduces severity, which they've always said, doesn't prevent breakthrough, which they've always said, but reduces the likelihood. Now they're saying, waning efficacy. I'm like, it's not like what's been said has right now is not accurately reflecting what's going on. It is important to then say what they said back then was completely wrong. Here's my point. When they told us one and done, when they told us 2 shots, and it turned out that wasn't the case, you're now going to have people outright saying, why should I believe you now? That's an important point. So don't. Talk to a doctor. Talk to a trusted medical professional. Because as much as people want to say they don't trust their doctors, I simply put it like, I had a good doctor. I had and have. And now I'm happy to have found a good doctor that I will consistently use. And that's the point of shopping around. It's weird to me that we live in this world, especially for people on the right who believe in private medical practice and don't like, government regulation and stuff like that, but treat hospitals as if they're guaranteed one-stop shops. No. I'm trying to get, plumbing fixed or whatever. We've gone through septic stuff. We go through gross, right? We go through 3 different companies. We go through one company and we say, okay, they're doing the job. And then we have a problem. We're like, let's try a different company. Imagine just thinking you can go to one doctor and be like, he's the best. No, you shop around. You get a second opinion. But the left is saying doctor shopping is a bad thing. And I'm like, why would I assume this guy's good at his job or this lady's good at her job? No, you got to look at the reviews and make sure they are good at their job. So I'll put it this way. I found a doctor that I think is a good doctor. You can do the same thing. You got to be careful about the left and the right in the media. I know. I think the left and the establishment more likely to be wrong and pushing lies. But then you'll get people who make mistakes about correlation. Hey, look at all these people who are vaccinated. They're getting sick. I'm like, yeah, well, when did they get vaccinated? In January? In February? Well, they're saying right now, outright, the efficacy has waned. And they didn't know that was going to happen. I don't think it's all completely nefarious. I certainly won't give them the benefit of the doubt. However, my point is, figure out what makes sense for you. And the government shouldn't be mandating things when they keep getting things wrong. They're going to come out and be like, everyone's got to do a jumping jack because it's good. And then they force people to do it. And then a month later, they're like, actually, those were bad. That's why I'm like, freedom, decentralization. Tell me I'm wrong on the science. Tell me you don't believe me. And I don't care. That's fine. Comment below. Let me know. Because I'll tell you this. I ain't a doctor. I ain't a scientist. And I don't know how to argue those points because I don't have all the studies pulled up. What I can tell you is freedom. And I can tell you the news. The government and the media and Fauci, they've been wrong on many things. So the mandates are a bad idea because they may be wrong again. But I don't know about the science or the medical practice because that's not my area of expertise. Policy is. And not even to a great degree, but to a degree enough where I can say we should have the right to decide for ourselves with our own medical practitioners. We shouldn't be arguing efficacy or immunity or any of that stuff because then all we do is negotiate the terms of our medical mandates. Nah, not okay. Government shouldn't mandate this stuff. And if they keep doing this in Europe, you're going to get more riots and maybe even some here. I'll leave it there. Next segment is coming up tonight at 8 p.m. over at youtube.com/TimCastIRL. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.